All right, looks like we've reached a quorum. Secretary will read SB 438.
Senate Bill 438 by Senator Crane of the 28th and others. A bill to be entitled, an act to amend Part 1 of Article 1 of Chapter 18 of Title 45 of the OCGA relating to the state employees' health insurance plan and for other purposes. Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 438. A bill to be entitled, an act to amend Part 1 of Article 1 of Chapter 18 of Title 45 of the OCGA relating to the state employees' health insurance plan and for other purposes.
Chair recognizes the Senator from the 28th to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fine members of the Senate. We're in for the home stretch, so I appreciate your consideration. I rise today to bring before you Senate Bill 438. It's times like this one might have occasion to wish you had a bill that might talk about the domestication of Mozambique tilapia, or possibly a resolution that might recognize the great contribution that plastic porta potties make to our state. But that's not what I bring before you today. I bring before you something that has a little more weight to it. And it includes a word that many are afraid to talk about. It talks of the word abortion. So let's get right into it and see what this opportunity before you today, when you cast your vote, will allow you to do. I believe today a vote in the affirmative for our bill will allow you to make a statement for life. But it'll also allow you to make a statement. It'll allow you to make a statement that reflects your duty to the taxpayers of Georgia and not to place an undue burden on them. Senate Bill 438 simply prohibits the state health benefit plan from providing for abortion services. Now let's be clear what this bill does not do. Let's be clear, and it might narrow down the questioning to some extent. It does not prohibit abortion or any kind of abortion. It does not limit it in any way. It does not make it inaccessible to anyone. It is a very narrowly defined bill in its scope and specificity. It just addresses those that are covered by the state health employment benefit health care plan. It covers them and says that the state health plan will not pay for those abortion services. There are some exceptions in here, and it would be good to read those. Some have asked, and have questioned rightfully so, what happens if you go ahead and have a miscarriage? What about the services necessary to take care of that? Well, specifically, we refer to the definition of abortion. It says that abortion services to remove a dead and unborn child who died as a result of a spontaneous abortion, these types of services will be covered under the state health benefit plan. So let's be clear what the bill does not say. It does not limit abortion services. It does not limit who can access abortion services in any way, shape, or form. The question that will be posed for you today is rather simple. Do you, as stewards of the taxpayers' money, which we are certainly called here to do you think it is right to allocate that money for abortion services? Do you think that is a function of the state? The answer to that is obviously no. So I ask for your favorable consideration today with regards to this bill, and let us not force the taxpayers of Georgia to participate in a practice that they might not find in line with their morals, their values, and their concept of life. If you vote with me today, if you signify with that green light on the board, you're making a small statement for life and a big statement that you are good stewards of the taxpayers' money. Mr. President, I welcome any questions that may come.
Chair recognizes Senator from 36 for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
The senator yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Stand
Thank you.
corrected. Thank you. Do you know how many women are covered under the state health benefit plan? I know that you...
I didn't separate it by male, by gender, but there are approximately 650,000 participants in the state health benefit plan currently.
And more than half of them are female, is that
That
not
would
true?
probably be a reasonable assumption, yes.
And do you said that this is a vote for life. Do you know what it costs when a profoundly damaged infant is born? Those days before that infant breathes its last breath in the intensive care, neonatal intensive care unit. Do you know what that costs the state when that's a person covered by state health insurance?
No, ma'am, I don't.
So that would call the question then of that there should possibly be a fiscal note to this bill, given that blocking women from having a medical procedure that their doctor and they consult on and advise on that could result in the birth of a profoundly damaged child who will live a few hours or a few days, what that costs our state health benefit.
I presume you know of which you speak, but I would suggest that it would be a number that would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to assess. And if we question the value of any human life, however long or short it may be, that is another topic for possibly another day.
Well, the Senator, further yield.
Certainly.
But isn't it true that if you're interested in being a good steward of taxpayer dollars,
Is there a
that
follow-up?
the best and wisest decision around that a woman and her doctor may face with a fetus that is profoundly damaged would be to terminate the pregnancy? Your bill would not provide coverage for that, would it?
You could make that argument.
And that could result in a fetus growing to full term and being delivered, or being delivered before full term, unable
a
to...
child, right? Correct?
Growing to being delivered.
Yes.
And causing the state to pay for health services, when in fact the choice of the woman and the advice of the doctor had been to terminate the pregnancy.
That is possible, yes.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Yes, Senator.
Senator, isn't it true that I've received several calls from medical doctors in my area, and I heard you allude to it one time, and isn't it true that they tell me that there's some 4,000 deliveries they make a year, and of that amount, about 25% or 1,000 are spontaneous abortions. And they were concerned about how would you put the language that would say they would be safely covered in the amendment you mentioned earlier. What is the language specifically that gives them
Well, thank you, Senator.
coverage
I think
on that?
the reference to the definition of abortion that it speaks to, 319A2, I think directly speaks to that, where it says, toward the end of that, it says, to remove a dead unborn child who died as a result of spontaneous abortion is not defined as abortion. And so the insurance companies, the doctors, can easily determine that that was not an abortion such that it was designed to terminate a life.
Senator, you further?
Yes, certainly.
Senator, isn't it true that in spite of that language, they alluded to me that that code section is so difficult, and they are not sure whether they would have other options to do that, because there are certain things they have to do, and if they did it a certain way, because of the way they have to define it, they would still be open for that kind of prosecution or that kind of law to apply to them.
Senator, that could very well be, but they navigate much more difficult waters constantly within the code. I think they would be able to navigate these fairly clearly.
Well, Senator, isn't it also true that we don't want to add another water for them to navigate if they have all these other levels of bureaucracy and things over them, because they're having to make that decision for the patients that they're dealing with at the time?
Well, it could be as you say, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 42nd.
Thank you. Will the senator yield?
Certainly, Senator.
Senator, am I correct that your bill allows for abortions to be covered so long as the physician uses the best opportunity for the unborn child to survive?
If my understanding that if they determine that it is the best medical procedure to sustain life, that what may be termed an abortion to terminate the pregnancy and bring that viable child outside of the womb in order for it to survive, then yes,
But will the senator further yield?
certainly.
But pre-viability, so long as they use the best opportunity for the unborn child to survive, your bill would allow for that termination to be covered. Is that correct?
It's my understanding, yes. If there are no further questions, I will yield the well.
One, actually, do have a couple of more questions. Senator from the 34th is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Yeo.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. President. Senator, is it not true that what the attempts are in this legislation is insurance is the main thing that we are driving at in this piece of legislation? Is that true?
I would say we're dealing with taxpayer dollars because we as a state health benefit plan are totally self-funded. We pay for every service. We're not really an insurance plan per se. We just pay for whatever needs of our members are. And in such, that has forced the taxpayers of Georgia to fund abortions for the last 35 years without probably knowing it.
Would the senator further yield?
Yes, ma'am.
So you're saying that if a female and her doctor have determined that that procedure is necessary, that we as taxpayers, because they are paying for their health care insurance, should not cover that procedure? Is that what I'm understanding you to say?
If the condition of that decision was such that the pregnant woman's life was in danger or was in threat of serious physical harm that would cause her loss of important functions, then the answer would be that the taxpayer would cover that in the life of the woman.
Senator, would you further yield?
Yes.
Would you then speak to, which was going to be my amendment had this bill not been engrossed, but speak to rape and incest in that scenario you just given?
Yes, ma'am. You know, I don't think that we as a body should compound one crime with what I view as another. I've heard recently that abortion, one of our presidential candidates even, called abortion a violent act, and I have to agree from where I stand. And so, hopefully if that answers your question.
It did not, but if you'll further yield, was
Yes.
that candidate a male?
Pardon?
Was that candidate you just referenced, was that a male?
It was, yes. I'm not aware of currently any female candidates for presidency.
Didn't know. We've had some. I didn't know who you were referring to,
Yes,
so I just
ma'am. I
thought I'd
understand.
clarify.
I understand.
Would the senator further yield?
Yes, for one more question, if I may.
Well, I'll just end it with this. Senator, would you agree with me that today is not a good day for women here in the Georgia General Assembly, in the Senate today, because of the attack on women and everything that we have tried to do through the women's suffrage? We are now revisiting bits and pieces every session to take us backward. Would you agree with that, Senator?
Senator, I appreciate your passion very much, but I would have to disagree. If there,
Chair recognizes Senator from the 26th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Will the senator yield?
Oh, absolutely, Senator. Thank you.
Senator, with this legislation, it will have a negative impact on those whose lives, their health, their well-being is being negatively impacted because of the dangers of the pregnancy. So, do you understand that this legislation puts women's lives in danger?
I don't see pregnancy as a disease, Madam Senator, but there may be cases when a pregnancy is very complicated, yes, and could be endangered of her life, and we specifically make provision for that within the bill.
This legislation can possibly put women's lives in danger. Do you not agree?
I understand your position, but I do not agree with it. Thank you.
Okay. Will the senator further yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you an expert on pregnancy, women's health care? Do you have any type of medical degree that puts you in a position to create this type of legislation?
Well, I don't know that expertise in all these fields would be a requirement. If it were, we would sure produce a great deal less legislation than we do. This is a specific, we're talking about taxpayer dollars and our responsibility not to present upon them the burden to fund things that they find morally reprehensible.
Will you further yield?
For one more question, yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me what the fiscal, financial positive to our state will be by enacting this legislation?
I cannot calculate that.
Then, will you further yield? One last question.
Yes, ma'am.
Then, sir, we are at this point, if it's not going to have a financial positive impact, then are we not trying to legislate morality and not attending really to the people's business, which is our job over their tax dollars?
Well, I would argue that we actually legislate morality when we fail to address this 35 years ago when the state first began to pay for abortions. Mr. President, if there's no further questions, I will yield the well. Thank you.
There are a couple of questions, but you do have the right to yield the well if you so wish.
I'll yield in consideration of time. Thank you.
Senators yielded the well. Chair recognizes the senator from the 40th to speak to the bill.
I'm going to be very brief. I believe the gentleman from the 28th is sincere as what he's doing. I also believe that he's got a good point about taxpayer dollars. We debate this issue a lot about where and when taxpayer dollars should be spent. However, I have my own beliefs. I go back in time when I talked to somebody once in the Christian Coalition. She's no longer down here. And I said, I personally am pro-life. However, when it's all said and done, I have two daughters. One of my daughters had been raped. I would probably try to have her take a baby till term. But at the end of the day, I said to her, Sadie, I probably can't tell you that if my daughter wanted me to write a check for an abortion, I couldn't do that. I just can't give you the answer. So while I believe the gentleman is very sincere in what he's doing, while I believe taxpayer dollars are at stake here, I don't know how much, to be quite honest with you, I also believe very, very firmly, as I've just outlined to you, in my own beliefs, and there's differences on this, Quite frankly, we've watched presidential candidates debate this. We've watched a bunch of them change their minds over the years, probably on both parties, and congressional and Senate, and et cetera. But there are no exceptions here except to save the life of the mother. I'm not going to take any questions. And while I respect the gentleman for the 28th and why he is doing this, and others in this room, I will vote no because there are no exceptions for rape and incest. With that, Mr. President, I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 42nd. Speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with the senator from the 40th that the senator from the 28th has my full confidence in his sincerity and his beliefs. And I rise merely to be sure that we all understand what this bill does and doesn't do. As it is written, and you all have on your desks, a letter from Legislative Counsel. And before this bill was engrossed, it was obvious to the author and to others that the bill had serious problems in the way that it was drafted. There are two problems with the language of this bill. Number one, I believe that I heard the senator from the 28th say in answer to my question that before viability, this would allow abortions. It says, this limitation shall not apply when a physician terminates a pregnancy in a manner which, in the reasonable medical judgment, provides the best opportunity for the unborn child to survive. Pre-viability, that would include perhaps any manner. Any manner. I don't believe that's the intent of the bill. But that's what the language says. That's what we're voting on if we vote out this bill. It may be unclear. Legislative Counsel says it's unclear, and I can't disagree. But it also does not say and does not provide for any reliable exception for the life of the mother or serious bodily injury, because that same language is unclear. If you would like to see, and if you turn to the second page of the document I put with you on your desks, you'll see what a medical emergency exception looks like. This is taken from a House Bill 954, which some of you may know about. This is what it looks like when you make an exception for the life of the mother or serious physical injury. But that's not what this bill does. Again, we don't know. Legislative Counsel can't tell you. The senator from the 28th can't tell you. I can't tell you. No lawyer in this room can tell you whether this bill allows abortions or not. Pre-viability. Why are we voting on it? That's not necessarily the best question. The real good question is, why can't we amend it right now? And the answer is politics, as always. But let's be clear about what we're voting on and what the bill says. And I've heard before in this chamber, well, we'll fix it in the House. That's not why I got elected to the Senate. That's not why any of you got elected to the Senate. That's not the way we should do business in here. Everybody knows it. We should table this bill. If we want to fix it, fix it. You have a majority, vote it out. But let's do it the right way. Let's do it in a way that makes sense. And let's do it in a way where we're honest and clear about exactly what it is that we're trying to do. This bill doesn't do that. With that, Mr. President, I'll yield for any questions.
There are no questions. There is a question. Senator from the 22nd is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
Yes.
Senator, you in your analysis and that of Legislative Counsel, can you provide some clarification about under what provisions a pregnancy would, quote, be terminated, and how best to solve this problem?
Sure. The language of the bill at lines 20 through 22 indicates that this limitation shall not apply when a physician terminates a pregnancy in a manner which, in the reasonable medical judgment of the physician, provides the best opportunity for the unborn child to survive. Then it says unless. In other words, they can use another manner that's not the best opportunity in these other circumstances. Pre-viability, according to legislative counsel and logic, it's one of two things is true. Either every manner is equally good and therefore they're all the best. In that scenario, it would allow any pre-viability abortion. Alternatively, there is no best, and therefore there is no exemption under any circumstances pre-viability. Those are the two possibilities, and as legislative counsel has written, I asked for his interpretation of whether an abortion performed when a fetus is pre-viable could be covered, and the answer seems unclear. We would have to guess. If the purpose of the bill and the purpose of this section is to provide for an exception for the health of the mother, then some sample language that could be used or could have been used absent the procedural posture is reflected on the next page in the handout that I provided from lines 151 to 159.
Senator, do you further yield?
Yes, Mr. Senator.
In looking at this measure, I'm trying to understand and answer this question for me, if you may. Is it not incumbent upon us with any good legislation to preserve life at every cost? And is it not true that with this measure that we have before us, it very well could be a pro-choice piece of legislation?
It is undeniably true that this bill enshrines language or would enshrine language in the Georgia Code that is equally susceptible to both interpretations. It could be, and I believe it probably is in the best legal determination I can make, a bill that enshrines in the law the ability to terminate a pregnancy pre-viability. Therefore, as you called it, perhaps a bill that would allow abortions and would allow taxpayers to fund those abortions. Yes, I believe that is the case.
So Senator, do you further yield?
I do.
Is it not true then that if I were to vote for this as a pro-life Democrat, that I could have problems down the road?
That is true.
Thank you.
No further questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 12th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, I rise in total opposition to this bill. Colleagues, in my honest and humble opinion, the economic implications of SB 438 have not been properly vetted. The women of Georgia have spoken and found this bill to be a giant Ponzi scheme. We put in, but we get nothing in return. Women all across the state feel that no matter their economic contributions, no matter their economic investment, no matter their economic sacrifices, in the end, we are literally robbed of economic equity in the workplace. Without freedom to choose our own personal health care path, the restrictiveness of this bill limits a female's ability to perform efficiently on the job. If you have noticed, women comprise close to 48.9% of the workforce. Women need to have the personal right, the personal ability to address their health issues without Big Brother telling them what to do, how to do, or when to do. Employee access to complete health care is crucial to continuous quality production in the workplace. Women that are forced to endure adverse physical conditions not of their choosing pose a threat to economic output, thereby escalating medical costs that usually extend medical expenses. Authors of the bill, if you were of a different gender, you would understand the unintended consequences of such an invasive personal decision. Even if we concede that this bill would reduce the number of abortions performed in Georgia, this does not coincide with a corresponding cost decrease for insurance companies. I yield the well if there are no questions.
No questions, Senator.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 26th. No? Speak to the bill?
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, senators, I also rise in opposition of Senate Bill 438 and its discriminatory nature. You know, just allow me to tell you a little story about when I was a little girl. And as my mom brought me to the doctor's office, I could see little children playing in the front. But we rode along on the side and parked on the side. And she took me in through the side door. Well, later during the visit, I asked her, why couldn't we go in through the front? And she said, because we can't, with no further explanation. It took years for me to realize what I had been a victim of. And today, with the discriminatory nature of this legislation, it is a sad day under the Gold Dome. This discriminatory insurance coverage ban unfairly forces women to spend more than men on medical care. The ban prohibits women from protecting themselves from the burdensome cost associated with unpredictable and sometimes absolutely essential medical treatment, while allowing men to do so in all cases. The insurance coverage can affect to a significant degree the conditions under which the procedures take place. Research on poor women affected by the denial of insurance coverage shows both the financial obstacles women living at the poverty line must surmount to obtain an abortion in the absence of medical coverage. Poor women having an abortion do so more than a week later than do affluent women, likely reflecting their increased difficulty in securing funds. In conclusion, reducing access to reproductive health care may entice women in their desperation and fear to seek unsafe and other illegal means to avoid unintended pregnancies. Undoubtedly, this puts an undue risk on women's lives. And I thank you. Mr. President, I yield the well if there are no questions.
There are no questions, Senator.
Thank you, sir.
Chair recognizes Senator from 38 to speak to the bill.
Mr. President, colleagues, I also rise to oppose Senate Bill 438. Endangering women by limiting their access to abortions may put a strain on their families as well. Many women who already have children are still at risk for unhealthy pregnancies. Many women, state employees who already have families may not be able to afford to pay out of pocket to terminate a pregnancy that may endanger their families in many ways, in addition to putting their own health at risk. The families of state employees need to be able to make the hard choices that will be in the best interest for them and their families without the additional concerns of how to pay out of pocket for a medical procedure that is necessary for the integrity as a family, that is a necessity for their family's well-being. Pregnancy in itself is a minefield. Luckily, many pregnancies go well, but there are many that do not. Barring a state employee's female's access to her insurance plan during this time is extremely bad policy. These decisions are made best between the woman, her family, God, and her doctor. Health insurance coverage of abortions, as in the case with many other basic health care services, often has less to do with access to care than it does with being able to pay for the needed health services without having to worry so much about sacrifice and other necessities. Our state employees' families must not be made to make this type of choice, which necessities are most important in this particular context. It is always bad policy, colleagues, to give something to someone and then take it away. You think very hard before you give your child a piece of candy and then decide that candy wasn't good for them. What happens? They throw a tantrum. You have to deal with the consequences. So think very hard about taking away something that we have given to the employees of the state. They sacrifice day in, day out. They've not had raises in 7 years. We continue, their share for the health benefits that they pay for have gone up in the last several years, and now you are saying that our female employees of the state are not going to be able to have a possibly needed health procedure. Think about it, colleagues. We ask a lot of our state employees, and they deserve the best from us. Mr. President, colleagues, as employees of the state, we pay into our health benefits package. And as a result of that, we need to think long and hard about what we are doing with this piece of legislation. If there are no questions, Mr. President, I yield the will.
No questions, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from the 44th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I rise to strongly oppose this bill, Senate Bill 438. You know, abortion is one of the safest surgical procedures for women in the United States. Fewer than 0.5% of women obtaining abortions experience a complication, and the risk of death associated with abortion is about 1/10 that associated with childbirth. Further reducing access to reproductive health care may entice women in their desperation and their fear to seek unsafe and other illegal means to avoid unintended pregnancies. Undoubtedly, this puts an undue risk on women's lives that is unnecessary and not shared by the male partner. And then secondly, limiting access to reproductive care would limit options for pregnant women who may have pregnancies that will put the mother or the child at risk. It may hinder the woman to provide a living for herself and for the other children. With more children, it would certainly distract from the quality of care for the other children. And then pregnant women may be put off receiving necessary chemotherapy while pregnant when their condition is not immediately life-threatening if they are not able to receive health care. You know, Not every unborn child is the perfect little Gerber baby, vibrant and happy. Many fetuses are burdened with severe abnormalities that will be harmful to the mother and the child during childbirth. Many of these unborn children may not survive childbirth, or childbirth may harm the mother. We cannot incentivize continuing pregnancies that may be harmful, even if they are not life-threatening. There is no exception for rape or incest in this exclusion of coverage. Carrying the child of a rapist to term may have severe and lifelong effects on the woman's mental health, which also may not be is not protected by this bill. Since there is no opportunity for amendment to this bill, we cannot do better to protect Georgia's women from this punitive law which seems to punish crime victims. There is no exception for rape or incest in this exclusion of coverage. I've never been raped. I can only imagine how a rape victim might feel. But you know, when I was working in downtown Atlanta many years ago on the night shift, when I got out of my car, the man grabbed me from behind. I was blessed that I wasn't raped, but when he grabbed me from behind and put the gun to me, I could have easily have been raped. Rape victims do not bring this on themselves. People say rape victims dress so they can be raped. That is insane. I was fully dressed, long sleeve blouse, long sleeve jacket, pants, a scarf around my neck. But I was still attacked, and it's not a good feeling. No provision in this for rape victims. So senators, I urge you today, male senators, don't give the perception that you don't care about women's issues. Send a clear message today, male senators, that you definitely care about women, their issues, their bodies, and their rapes. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I yield the wheel.
No questions, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from the 34th.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, this may come as a surprise to you, but I am pro-life. That's evident. I had 2 children. I don't think that I should stand here and have to defend what I try to do for everybody. Now, my story is, my firstborn, well, let me back it up. Before I even start bearing children, I had written in my high school memory book, you know how y'all doodle? We doodle. I wanted 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls. That was the goal for me coming out of high school. I wanted 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls. I had my first child, who was a preemie. That long ago, over 30 years ago, 2 pounds, 4 ounces. My firstborn. Okay. He's doing very well. Many of you have seen him. He's a Georgia Tech police officer, and I'm proud to say that he's doing very well today. I value life. My second-born couldn't carry her full term. She was 4 pounds. But you know what the doctor said? She's 2 pounds bigger than the first one. So I think we're going to be all right. We induced labor and we had a second one. Of course, they told me that was enough. My husband agreed. We had a boy and a girl. We could buy a dog and a cat. So we were fine with our family. But I tell you that because I'm not advocating anybody make an abortion. I am advocating a woman's right to choose. That's the issue. You all are trying to tell us, ladies, what, when, where, how much jump, and we supposed to be in step. That's not the story today. This is 2012, and I stand before you to say, no more. We want to make it clear to you, have a discussion. In 12 years that I've been in the General Assembly, not a single woman had brought forth any bills to save taxpayer dollars or otherwise, where it's regarding women and their bodies. It is so appalling to me to have to come to work. I enjoy coming in the General Assembly. I actually wore bright yellow, and I've been to Sunshine. I've been having a lot of people talk about me and my brightness today. Thank you. But it was because I knew it was going to be doom and gloom when I saw the calendar. I saw the calendar and I said, let me just brighten it up because it's going to be doom and gloom. Here they go again. When is it going to stop? When are you all going to realize that we have brains and beauty? Come on, guys. We are not your property. The other issue, the have-lotters and the have-notters. The have-lotters, let me tell you what they do. Park the wives at home, go get the girlfriends, girlfriend get knocked up, they got money, they pay for it. Poor people can't do that. There are so many young folk who are in the clinics, and the big guys, they are paying for these abortions out of pocket. So no, it is not on state health care benefits, but yet you have the funds to take care of your own little thing in private. That's what I'm talking about, the have-lotters and the have-notters. So every time you all bring these offensive bills down here, wanting to save taxpayer money, wanting to be fiscally responsible, think about all of this other stuff you do. See, I don't go fish. We can save a lot of money in a lot of areas. Why does it always have to be on women? Mr. President, I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 55th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. This bill presented by senators of this chamber who have railed against government mandates regarding the health choices of Georgia citizens for years would mandate that Georgia's government control the coverage offered by insurance companies to people that ascribe to their services. These bills will carve out of health insurance a private industry, one single service. Voting for these bills will be a vote for our state governments to control the way that private insurance companies earn their money in Georgia. I find it curious that senators would promote this kind of arbitrary government control of our state's insurance companies. Why are mandates suddenly acceptable when it comes time to legislate morality? In the Netherlands and in Germany, for example, where almost all abortions are free to citizens, abortion rates are less than half that in the United States. And in Canada, which has no national restrictions on abortions, as well as a comprehensive national health system, the abortion rate is considerably low, below ours. My reason for coming to this well tonight is to ask you to oppose this bill. It is not good for Georgia. In my opinion, it's embarrassing for Georgia. And I want the senator from the 28th to know that I will be voting the red button, which means no. I yield the well, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Senator from 36th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in opposition to this bill, and which should be no surprise given the comments that I've made from the well earlier and the concerns that we as women are expressing about this legislation. We do understand, I think we should understand very, very clearly, this is a bill that's directed at state employees and at the insurance coverage for state employees. Let's not lose sight of that. There are almost 700,000 covered lives of state employees by our state health plans, and that's 17 different options. We pay dearly for that coverage. These are the same state employees who've seen positions combined, positions eliminated, who've borne the brunt of this recession, and who every year have paid increasing percentages of expensive health benefit plans, with an expectation that we're getting comprehensive health coverage. My health coverage is through the state health insurance plan. These are employees who have, for 7 years, not had a cost of living increase, no pay increases, faced furloughs, faced layoffs. Huge number of the people on this plan are school teachers. And 51.2% of Georgians are female. Far more, a great higher percentage of the people covered by our state health insurance are women, given the fact that teachers are a huge population, a huge part of that. So this is not some minor bill that somebody took a notion on. This is has a sweeping impact on state employees and our families. And we all go back home, in almost every instance, to people in our community who are state employees and who rely on state health insurance. That's what this bill is tampering with. That's what this bill is fundamentally seeking to make a change in. I appreciate the remarks of the senator from the 40th about when you're really confronted with those deeply personal decisions in the case of in the event of an unplanned pregnancy, but most certainly in the event of a pregnancy that occurs as a result of a rape. Any of us here could have a female child who grows up and goes off to college, goes off to pursue their next stage in life. Or it could actually happen to a very vulnerable, mentally unstable young teenager. Women and girls are attacked and raped routinely in our nation. It's not a pretty fact. It's something many would prefer not to dwell on, but it is a hard fact, and it's a fact that any one of us who has a daughter, and this could occur, who's covered by this health insurance, would face a very difficult private decision about your child conceiving and faced with bearing a child that was a result of a rape. And I say that to say that these are deeply personal decisions that women and families have to make with their doctor, based on their religious beliefs, based on their family situations. And what this bill will do is say, those decisions, your call, but guess what? Your coverage is pulled for a medical procedure. So I appreciate the candor of the gentleman from the 40th to say, faced with that decision, I'd really have to say, I would have to make it at that moment in time. And women have to make decisions all the time. We have to seek and use contraception for the vast majority of our lives. Our reproductive cycle is quite long, lasting from 11 to 12, up into the 50s potentially. 1 out of 3 women in the country will get an abortion in their lifetime, and that's the Guttmacher Institute. So we're not talking about some fringe. We're talking about 1/3 of the females in the nation will get an abortion at some time in their lives for any one of an array of reasons. And I will say to you, first of all, this is really an egregious thing to do to our state employees' health benefits plan. And do you know there's no fiscal note here? There's no fiscal. We're just going to casually go in and dump this language into the law books, and all of a sudden the people that administer our state health benefits plan are supposed to be running around figuring out who, doctor, which, how come, when, how. But it's so narrow that actually they'll just mainly say no coverage, because this bill does not allow for this bill does not take into account a woman's mental health, emotional health. And the language, as has been pointed out to you at the very start of this debate, is circuitous and confusing. And in fact, when's the last time you saw a letter from Legislative Counsel stating how murky and how cloudy and how speculative and how uncertain it is as to what the real impact of the language is? I don't care where you stand on what you and your spouse or your daughter or your child, what your personal opinions are around abortion. You're being asked to vote on a bill that is just, frankly, fatally flawed, and does not do, in the reading of the language, what it's purported to do. You know that we're stepping away from a standard that is in U.S. law. And let me just say before I close, because I know the night is long. And the Supreme Court ruling on Roe versus Wade established that the right of privacy extends to women making decisions about their own reproductive health. Now there's a sector, and it's a minority, who don't agree with that opinion. And what their leadership has said over the years is, in addition to standing in the doorway of medical clinics and blocking women from service, et cetera, in addition to that, we're going to whittle away, narrowing women's access to this medical procedure. If we can't overthrow the Supreme Court, we're going to whittle away and narrow. And that's what this represents. That's what this represents. And you know, the departed former speaker who served so long across the hall in the House, and I was privileged to serve under him, Speaker Tom Murphy said on numerous occasions, and there are plenty of people in this room that can be a witness to it, that he said, you know, I'm pro-choice because I never want to go back to the time of the backroom alley butcher and the botched kitchen table abortion that puts a woman in a hospital and then in the graveyard. My. And that's the past that we can look back at and learn from. If a woman determines that she cannot sustain a pregnancy and needs to terminate a pregnancy, she will find a way to do that, and it will not necessarily be a way that's in the best interest of her health or what we as a society stand for. This has been erected in Washington in memory of the courageous women who died from illegal, unsafe abortions because they had no choice. So when we talk about women having choice, it's not a minor notion, it's not a popular political slogan, it's about controlling what happens to you, your body, and your life to the extent possible, making those personal, painful decisions. I had a very close family member. He and his wife wonderfully welcomed the pregnancy, heard in the 6th or 7th month from the doctors the very, very sad news that they had the fetus was fatally flawed and could not sustain life for a predictable lifetime, and that they faced that painful decision that they never wanted to face to terminate a pregnancy. You know, they stopped some of their voting patterns after that experience when they realized that there were people who really thought that they should dictate to them about that private decision, that private painful decision that they made some 30 years ago. 25 years ago. Finally, I just ask you to look at this Legislative Council letter, consider the implications, consider the message that you're sending to women in Georgia, consider the message you're sending to state employees, and do the right thing. Please do the right thing by voting no on this bill. And Mr. President, I will yield the well if there are no questions.
No questions.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from 35th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, wow. I tell you, this is a troubling time when we have this Senate bill before us. I'm concerned and dismayed about the total disrespect and disregard of women in the state of Georgia. Pregnancy is not as easy and perfect as some of you guys may think. There are many things that can go wrong with a pregnancy, and because of this, there's personal and emotional situations that you will probably unlikely even know when a woman loses her baby. There are any number of fetal anomalies that occur along the way that are not compatible with life outside the womb, but do not necessarily cause the death of this fetus in the womb. But the parents of this baby, if they are under the physician, know that they will never bring this baby home from the hospital. So does this bill cover an abortion if the woman, her partner, her physician, her faith determine that this is a choice that they must make? You know, the presidential candidate, Rick Santorum, and his wife had a choice to make many years ago. They had to choose whether they would have a non-elective abortion that was recommended by their doctor or carry the baby full term. His wife wrote a book about the fact that the baby didn't even live 24 hours after they took it to full term. There are too many women who receive the catastrophic news that their fetus has severe or congenital abnormalities, or chromosome problems, or genetic problems, or a lethal health problem with very serious problems that has both physical and psychological aspects, especially to the mother, her husband, and her family. These families go through tremendous stress and strain, anxiety, depression, grief, sorrow, and suffering, worry, etc., due to this fetus's pain and discomfort. Yes, they know they're in pain and they know that their baby is in pain. They are uncomfortable. And many know that this baby has already met its demise or will likely be stillborn. This high-risk pregnancy is then recommended to be terminated by the physician. And you know, it's a miracle of medicine, and it has greatly been improved in this 21st century. So I say to you today, we must not pass Senate Bill 438 because the doctors know, the mothers know, and they have to make that choice. They want to prevent more pain and suffering of a severely ill unborn fetus. There's Down syndrome, spina bifida, cystic fibrosis, dwarfism, etc. Many things that can be detected while in the early weeks of pregnancy. So does this mother have to carry this baby through full term? Well, current insurance plans cover these unelective terminations due to the serious fetal anomaly and allow mothers to seek often some life-saving medical treatments like chemotherapy, dialysis, and other treatments that's needed to protect the health of the mother. But if the abortion coverage ban in this Senate bill passes, it will eliminate coverage for these procedures, and women making the most difficult decisions of their very lives will have to be faced with personal and medical decisions that is very costly, that they simply cannot afford. So I ask you today, please defeat Senate Bill 438. This bill was introduced by 6 male senators and was heard in the Male-Only Insurance Committee. They don't know what we women have to go through. And just like the senator from the 34th, I only had 2 children. I've been married 40 years to the same person. We wanted a lot of children, but that's all we were blessed with. So it's nothing personal about this. I want to make sure you understand that I'm not promoting to have abortions, but I think that when it's necessary or when a woman wants to choose what she must do, then she should be able to do that. Again, senators, please vote no for Senate Bill 438. I yield the well. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from 32nd. Speak to the bill.
I've sat here listening to a lot of discussion about what I believe this bill is not about. And the senator from the 28th referenced that. In my view, this bill actually doesn't go far enough, because should this bill pass, abortions would still be allowed in this state under federal law, and coming federal law, it'll be even greater. And approximately 4,000 abortions are performed every single day in this country. I don't stand here as a doctor. The senator from the 26th asked the senator from the 28th if he was a physician or had a medical background. I stand here suggesting yes, I do, suggesting that this is not only a women's issue. And I beg to differ with those who would object to that. I stand here as a father of 5. This is a personal issue for me. I had two sons 23 years ago. They were born within the second trimester, Adam and Andrew. They were born at 24 weeks. They lived for about a day. Both of them held onto my little finger for not enough hours. God gives us each child for a certain amount of time. You've met my other 3 children. Joshua, my 15-year-old, was here today. Today, abortions can be performed on 24-week-old children. Those babies that are 14 and 16 ounces, that's a pound or less. So this is a personal issue. I can't pretend to be the woman, but I know what it's like to be a father, and I know what it's like to be a father of 2 boys born in the second trimester. If this bill passes, women can still have and do have the right to have an abortion. This is not about abortions. They can still have that right, and they can still make that choice. Nothing changes in the law. I think we should focus on really the issue at hand. The issue is who pays. I think we should focus on the issue at hand, and that's, should your neighbor, should I be required to pay for someone else's abortion? Should your neighbor or should I be required to pay for someone else's abortion? I say no. And I'd ask you to stop forcing me to pay for your choices to have an abortion. Today, each year, over the last 5 years, we know this, we've seen the statistics. The state health benefit plan allows the payment of about 350 to 450 elective abortions in the state, elective abortions. I'm asking you, senators, to take a stand for life, because I know you want to, and I know you do, and I know you always will, even when some others may not. But I stand here today for this time to say I'm standing for life. I'm going to stand for those babies that are 24 weeks old or whatever happens, for those babies that are struggling to live, and I'm standing here really to say I don't want to be paying anymore. This is all about who pays. It's not about whether or not you have the right to have that abortion. We've heard a lot of discussion on that. But I'm asking you to stand up for that and stand up for my rights as much as I'm standing for yours. And with that, Mr. President, I'm not going to take any questions. I'll yield the well, and thank you for listening.
Senators yielded the well. Chair recognizes Senator from the 6th speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Those who know me, I don't come to the well very often. Those who've worked with me know I do a lot of things behind the scenes and in this chamber. But let me tell you, the Senator from the 42nd got up here and made an excellent legal point that it was unclear what this bill does in the sense of either is it a pro-choice bill or an anti-choice bill, or whatever language you choose to use. But it's unclear. Well, the senator from the 40th came up here and said he was unclear what exactly he would do in a certain situation. And the senator from the 28th came up here, and answering a question from the senator from the 34th was not as clear as he probably needed to be. Well, it's very clear to me. It's clear to me as a husband and as a father. I'm a minority, not just in this chamber, but I'm a minority at home. I have 2 daughters, and I obviously have a wife. And it is clear as day on this bill there are no exceptions when it comes to the issue of rape or incest. So let's talk about rape. Those who've known me, I've served in this chamber now for 8 years. Some of you have met my wife, who's come down here several times. Some of y'all have met my daughters, they've paged down here. Just like anything, time flies. My daughter is now a freshman in college, 20 years old, far away from Georgia. Unfortunately, I couldn't convince her to stay here. She went out of state. And I have a 17-year-old daughter, too. And by the way, I'm a state employee. And I'm happy to mention the fact that, guess what? I take state health insurance as a state employee. But obviously, it's the intention of this bill that he's going to decide for my daughters and my wife if, God forbid, either one of them or three of them, any of them were raped, in the decision of what they need to do in that situation. That's what this bill does. Now, I'm fortunate that most of our state employees, in fact, most of us in this chamber are very fortunate compared to most of our state employees. If we want to talk about the issue of affordability, if that issue came up and that decision that my wife or my daughters had to make, I'm in a position that I could pay for it if that procedure was necessary. And most of the folks in this room are in that position too. But as we all know about our state employees, let's just say we're definitely not at the top of the list when it comes to pay. We just had a 17% increase in state health insurance this past year. We haven't had a raise for state employees in years. So it's clear what the intention of this bill is. As a state employee, we're going to make this decision for you if you're raped, or God forbid, you're a victim of incest. That's clear. So let's all just make sure we understand on at least this issue what is clear. Mr. President, I will definitely be voting no on this bill. To sit here and tell my wife and my daughters on exactly what they have to do on this issue makes me very angry when it comes to this issue. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I will not address the bill. I leave that to the good conscience of each and every one of you. I will clear something up that maybe was not perfectly clear. The state of Georgia has a group health insurance plan. Right now, it's with United Healthcare. That's a private insurance company. We did have it with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Put it out on bids, and then we transferred it over to United Health. They gave us a better premium. And that's who your group plan is with, and that's what the state employees health benefit plan, it is employee-employer contribution. Now, I own an insurance agency in Americus, Georgia. My colleague there from the 15th is a licensed life health agent. My good friend from Dunwoody from the 40th has the same exact business I do. We sell this type group plan. The state of Georgia put it out on bid, and it's written by an insurance company. Now, it's employer-employee. Same way you got in your private business, same way I do it for my employees. So it is fixed that way. Now, let me tell you who's covered under that. All state employees, and basically the largest group are school teachers that are covered under the state employees health benefit plan, a private policy. You choose your options with United Health. The Board of Regents is not covered under this plan, nor would it, the way I read this legislation, be covered by this legislation. They have a group policy at the Board of Regents with Aetna Casualty and Surety Company, another private insurance company. So to say it's taxpayer funded to the extent that the employer's contribution is there, it is, but the employee matches that. The City of Atlanta, the City of Americus, the City of Savannah all have group plans or whatever, the City of Lumpkin, and some people pay it all. My daddy used to pay everything for all the employees. Well, that got a little bit too high. We had to cut back on that. My brother and I bought our business from him back in the 70s. But it is a group policy with a private company, and to stretch and say it's taxpayer funded, only the amount the employer contributes into the group plan. I will not speak to the bill. I'll leave that to the good conscience of each and every senator. And obviously I'm not female, so I'm not qualified to talk any further. But I wanted to clear that up. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from the 28th, you wish to close? Nope. Questions on the adoption of committee substitute. Senator from the 42nd, what purpose you rise?
Chairman, I, at the appropriate time, would move to table the bill.
Now would be that time.
Mr. President, nobody in here knows what this bill does, whether it provides for abortions or doesn't provide for abortions. It's not ready to be voted upon, and I would move that we table the bill.
The senator from the 42nd has moved that this bill be laid on the table. All of those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion to lay it on the table, the yeas are 19, the nays are 33, and the motion has failed. Now the question is on the adoption of committee substitute. Is there objection? Without objection, the committee substitute is adopted. Now, does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is the objection granted? Report of committee which fair will pass to the bill. Chair is none. Report of committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? Chair is none. Main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? Question is on the passage of the bill. All of those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. And the secretary will unlock the machine. Bill, the yeas are 33, the nays are 18, and this bill, having received constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from 32nd.
Mr. President, I move to
or I ask for unanimous consent to move Senate Bill 508 to the foot of the calendar.
Is there objection? Without objection, it will be moved to the foot of the calendar. Secretary will read Senate Bill 292.
Senate Bill 292 by Senators Albers of the 56th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 4 of Title 49 of the OCGA relating to public assistance so as to enact the Social Responsibility and Accountability Act and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. There are 2 fiscal notes attached to the original and the substitute bill, as well as a minority report. Senate Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 292. Bill to be entitled an act to provide a short title to provide a statement of legislative intent to amend Article 9 of Chapter 14 of Title 49 of the OCGA related to temporary assistance for needy families and for other purposes. Senator Ford of the 39th offers the following amendment. Amend the Senate Health and Human Services Committee substitute to Senate Bill 292 by inserting after 2 at the beginning of line 1 the following: to provide for drug testing of certain recipients of public funds and for other purposes.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 56th to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President, my fellow senators. I bring before you Senate Bill 292, the Social Responsibility and Accountability Act. This is a good government bill. Welfare was designed to help people and to provide a bridge for those in need. The ultimate goal of any social program should be to give a hand up, not just a handout. I've worked with many groups to perfect this bill through the subcommittee and committee process, and I'd like to specifically thank the senator from the 3rd and the 45th for their hard work, as well as the several communities in special needs and disabilities, the elderly intact family organizations, and others, where we made the necessary exceptions to perfect our bill. I've lost count on how many drug tests I've taken over the years now. Through private business, I'm paid to perform a service, of which I then pay tax dollars that fund state programs such as TANF. As a firefighter, I get paid nothing, but I joyfully serve to protect others' lives and property and take a drug test. To ask those who get a free benefit from the state to do the same is simply equaling the playing field. As elected officials, we have a responsibility to assure that the people's money is not funding illegal activities, and we are the best steward of taxpayers' dollars. There is a fiscal note that is attached to the substitute in your binder that will show you this will save the state of Georgia money, over $100,000. However, I believe this to be very low. For in the state of Florida in the first quarter, they saved $1.8 million. But the real benefit here and the real savings is getting people clean and back on the path to becoming a contributing member of society. The state of Florida does, in fact, have a temporary injunction on their drug testing TANF bill today. And we worked very closely with the state of Florida and their Attorney General's office and the other legislators to make sure we corrected all the concerns relating to HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and we are confident that will move forward. And the other questions that could be related to the law of the Constitution can very simply be answered with the 1996 Welfare Reform Act that was passed by the Congress and signed by President Bill Clinton, specifically authorizing states to drug test TANF recipients. This program will cost up to but no more than $17 per person for a non-intrusive swab test. If you pass the test, you get reimbursed the money you spent. If you fail the test, you can try again in 1 month, but that drug test was on your nickel. If you fail a second time, you have to wait 3 months, but we want to give you the option to get back in. And if you even fail 3 times, you'll have to wait 1 year. but the benefits will never be held back if we're waiting to get those test results prior to you receiving your TANF payment. We also work to assure that families and children were protected in all manners and that only one parent or guardian would have to pass the test. We worked hard and we covered all our bases. Before I end, let me give you a very important fact. The state of New Jersey completed a study on their TANF recipients and found that those who were using illegal drugs were much more likely to stay on welfare. In fact, the average welfare recipient in New Jersey stayed on for 5.8 years, and those using illegal drugs were there for 12 years, more than double. This bill is really at the core of our ideology. That is why I named it the Social Responsibility and Accountability Act. I think most everyone before they got to the chamber today already knew how they'd vote on this bill. My ideology is simple. True compassion is doing what's best for people, not easiest. With that, I urge your favorable passage, and I will take a few questions. Thank you, Mr.
Chair
President.
recognizes Senator from 33rd for some questions.
Senator Yield.
Yes.
Senator, on your fiscal note, I think I'm on the right bill. Make sure. Yeah. On your fiscal note on page 2, in the second paragraph or the first paragraph, it says, resultingly, the fiscal impact of this bill could range from a net cost of $84,500 to a positive budget impact of $103,000. So, therefore, we're talking about it either costing or saving dollars with the implementation. Is that right?
I believe the overall cost savings, where they referenced $103,000.
With a possibility of a negative $84,500.
Yes, but again, based on the results from Florida at $1.8 million just in the first quarter, I believe that to be considerably low.
Is the population of Florida and Georgia similar in the way they would project their cost and savings?
There are similarities in the bill, yes.
But Senator, do you think maybe having spent possibly $700 million earlier in the day, that saving $103,000 might not be our best day in accounting?
Well, at the heart of this issue, Senator, I appreciate that, is not necessarily just saving dollars. It is helping people to make sure we're using the people's money to get people clean and get them back. Thank you for your question.
Chair recognizes Senator from 42nd. Let's go to the senator from the 34th. 34th.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator, would you just walk me through the process in this legislation? I'm having a little bit of a challenge trying to understand what happens when a applicant comes into a facility to apply for TANF. Help me go through what's the next step.
As you know, Senator, when someone applies for TANF, it is actually a very long process. It's a lot of paperwork to complete that. One of the steps will be they will have to go get a drug test, either at a clinic or somewhere that provides a swab test. They are very common today as drug tests are used in a variety of civil service and private sector jobs.
Will the senator further yield?
Yes.
So, Senator, if I was going to apply for TANF, I got to the facility to make my application. I make my application, went through all of this paperwork. Then they tell me I need to go and get a drug test. Is that the next step?
That would be correct.
Okay, and if I had to get a ride down there, now I got to get a ride to go somewhere else, or is it going to be at that facility that you can walk to get drug tested?
I cannot guarantee it will be at the facility, but I'm sure our folks who administer that will give them a list of places that they can go.
You are sure of that, right? That's what you were saying. Your testimony is, if you further yield, you're sure they'll be able to get where and how they can get to the next step in the process.
Well, they will give them a list of places where they can get their drug test completed.
Will the senator further yield?
Yes, Senator.
So they are given the list of places they can go to take the drug test. They take the drug test. What's the timeline for them to get the results? Is it immediate? Do you know, if you will yield?
Yeah, ma'am, in response to your question of how long it will take to get the results, it will vary depending on who does the test, but specifically in the legislation, it will not hinder their benefits in any way. So this will not stop their benefits from happening. So if the drug test does not come in time for them to get their first TANF check, they will in fact get it. This will not be held up, and there's specific provisions in the bill for just that.
Thank you, Senator. Will you continue to yield?
Yes, ma'am.
So that means if they are renewing a TANF, because it would be new legislation, then they will continue to get their check until, or get their assistance until that results come in.
That is correct.
Thank you. Will you further yield?
Yes, Senator.
So, Senator, I heard you say this legislation will help people get clean. Is there a program, or how do they then get clean? I'm trying to understand the mindset for this piece of legislation and needy families trying to survive.
Well, Senator, you asked two questions. The first one I will answer, and your last question was in reference to needy families. Only one family member, be it mother or father, has to pass that test, again, in order to save those kids from being put in harm's way. And if there was a single-parent family, then a guardian could come in and pass that test if the single parent failed it. So again, protecting children was at the forefront of this bill. But if someone failed it, we hope they will use one of many means that are available through lots of non-for-profits other areas to get themselves clean. But we cannot continue to use state tax dollars to fund illegal activity.
Thank you. Will you yield?
Yes.
So, Senator, will they then be given a list, just like where they go to get a test, to find out where they can go to get help to get clean? Is that part of the process? I'm trying to make sure that when we say in your opening statement that gives them an opportunity to get clean, what's the process? Because I personally don't know, but I'd like to know before I vote on this piece of legislation.
Senator, I believe when someone fails the drug test, they will have time, a month, to retest. In that time, I think we can encourage them as a state, but we're not going to make a specific recommendation on where to go. That will be up to the individual. I'm sure some people are addicted to illegal drugs, and some people are using them for recreational purposes. Either way, using state tax dollars to fund use of illegal drugs is wrong.
If the senator will yield for one more question.
Yes, Senator.
So, Senator, with this legislation, an applicant can go in, make application, be told where they can get drug tested, then they can be told after they've gotten the results back, but it's not going to tie up any of their time for being serviced. Then they'll be told if they fail, given another list or suggestions, because they can't be told where to go, but they will be suggested where they can go to try to help get them clean so they can be reunited with their families. Am I on the right track, Senator?
Well, Senator, you lost me a little at the end there about being reunited with their families. If someone fails a drug test, the onus will be on their personal responsibility to hopefully either stop using illegal drugs or do whatever is necessary to get themselves clean.
Thank you, Senator.
Chair recognizes Senator from 36 for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Do you believe that we should go down this road that Florida went down? That's the only other state, isn't it? Florida is the only other state that has this type of law on the books?
There are a couple of other states who are preparing to implement it.
Well,
and there are several other pending in state legislatures.
But there's one state that has done this thus far, is that right?
That is correct. Florida has passed this, and it has an injunction.
And that's right. There is a court injunction against this very drug testing of TANF recipients in the Florida situation. Isn't that true?
That is true, and if you heard my remarks earlier, Senator, you'll know that we worked with the state of Florida, their Attorney General's office, as well as the legislators who created this legislation to very deliberately address the issues specifically related to HIPAA, which we have done so. And then the other challenge, we are very confident we'll pass through, and we've worked with attorneys through the Heritage Foundation and other areas that we already have the law set in place from 1996 to authorize the testing of TANF recipients.
But isn't it true everybody doesn't share your confidence in the Heritage Foundation and might not be real interested in paying out taxpayer dollars to spend on a big legal case that we will face should this bill become law?
Well, I do not believe there will be a legal case because, again, we addressed a lot of those issues ahead of time.
I'm not sure that was ever demonstrated in our committee hearings, Senator, with all due respect. But let me ask you this. Why would we single out TANF recipients as the only recipients of public funds to be drug tested?
That is a very good question, Senator, because we do not have direct control over many of the programs that we pay into that have federal control. But I do believe that those accepting any type of social service from the state should be on the same equal playing field as anyone else would in a civil service or a private market job.
So Hope Scholars should be tested, drug tested. Would you be in favor of that?
Senator, I appreciate you trying to make this into a Hope Scholarship discussion, but I will not be making that today.
Well, that wasn't my point. It was to demonstrate why are we singling out the recipients of this federal temporary aid to needy families for drug testing when all sorts of folks avail themselves of public benefits that are not drug tested.
Well, I will again cite New Jersey as the perfect example where they looked at their TANF recipients and the average person spent 5.8 years on welfare, but those who are using illegal drugs spent 12 years, more than double, and that is reason enough.
But, Senator, isn't it true that Georgia law limits TANF benefits to 4 years? So pulling up that New Jersey example is really way out of the ballpark. We have a 4-year limitation, lifetime limitation on TANF benefits, do we not?
Well, Senator, I'm sure you know what you speak, but I think that the math used in New Jersey was symbolic of it was less than half for those who are not using illegal drugs. So if it was 4 years, it would be less than 2.
Isn't it true that the highest drug usage is between the 18 and 25-year-olds?
For recreational drug use, I would have to agree.
And isn't it true that 75% of the adults receiving TANF are caring for minor children, and they're not their own children. They may be their grandchildren or a relative. But 75% are oftentimes grandmothers or older people. And to drug test this population, it seems hard to imagine that it would be worth the money that you're suggesting that we spend on it.
Well, Senator, I would counter with that. I didn't think I needed to be drug tested to be a firefighter, but I gladly took the test.
But isn't that true? That has no comparison at all to a TANF recipient.
Not at all. It's an equal playing field, Senator. If we're going to do the same for the private marketplace and the same for the civil marketplace, to ask those who get a free benefit from the government to do the same is simply equaling the playing field.
Let me ask you, I don't believe you spoke to this in your remarks, but if you did, I'll stand corrected. But there are people on TANF, and then there are people on TANF who are also Medicaid recipients because of their income level. Now, in this bill, as I understand it, if you're a Medicaid recipient and you're caring for minor children and have a TANF federal check, you will have to pay for your own drug test. Isn't that right?
It is unclear right now whether Medicaid will cover part of that. We hope that it will, but we are not 100% sure yet.
Didn't we have testimony from the department that this would not be a medically necessary procedure and that Medicaid would not pay for it? It would come out of state dollars?
Well, actually, the department was unclear on that at this point.
It's true, isn't it true that that's not what I heard the department say? Will you further yield?
Yes, for a few more questions, and then we'll respect everybody's time and move on.
You gave a 48-hour window for someone to apply for TANF benefits and then get the drug test or else not be eligible. Is that right?
I believe that is correct.
And do you have any appreciation for the burden of this on a poor family struggling to keep their head above water? An older woman, a grandmother caring for grandchildren whose parents are absent. Do you have any compunction about placing this sort of burden on a population that's already terrifically burdened and, by the way, only totals 4,000 people and a few more in the state of Georgia?
Senator, I believe that the process to receive TANF benefits is long and extensive for good reason, and this will not be overly burdensome.
Well, one final question. I appreciate your yielding. Isn't it true that no court has ever upheld suspicionless drug testing by state government for TANF applicants? Isn't that true?
I do not know the answer to your question, but I again will reference the 1996 Welfare Reform Act signed into law by President Bill Clinton, which specifically authorizes the states to test TANF recipients for drugs.
And you are familiar, as I take my seat, that the Office of Legislative Counsel has issued an opinion stating that this language could face serious constitutional challenges in the courts.
I am aware of their concerns, and again, that is why we work so closely with the Attorney General's office and the state of Florida.
And isn't it true in the state of Florida, their law was struck down? It's under injunction.
In the state of Florida, I think this is the third final question, but in the state of Florida, they have a temporary injunction, and they are working to correct their legislation as well.
And you know my opinion that the better part of wisdom would be to not go forward with a bill that's under court challenge in a neighboring state and pay the ensuing legal fees. There will be a challenge, and we'll be paying lawyer fees. Why?
Well, Senator, I appreciate your questions, and I will end again with the fact that we work very closely to address all the concerns related to HIPAA and all of the other potential obstacles, and we reference back to the law that has been in place for so long, and I'd like to give someone else a chance to answer three questions. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from 38th. Before Senator from 38th, excuse me just one moment. Let's keep it down a little bit. We're getting a little bit noisy. Don't mind senators having conversations, but there's a voice in which you can do that doesn't disrupt the debate in the chamber. Senator from the 38th is recognized. Speak a question. Senator from in the well.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the senator yield?
Yes, Senator.
Senator, could you tell me what the qualifications are for someone to be on TANF?
I do not have all the specific qualifications in front of me at this time, Senator.
Can you tell me one?
Obviously, part of it is income-based, of not having enough income at the time in order to cover their expenses.
And Senator, will you further yield?
Yes, Senator.
Can you tell me how much that would be?
Senator, I do not have all the specifics in front of me that you may be inquiring about.
Okay. Is it not true that the maximum amount that an individual can get from TANF is $280 a month?
Again, Senator, I do not have the specific information in front of me at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Will you further yield?
Yes, Senator.
If the maximum is $280 a month that a person would be getting from TANF, and we are saying that in your figures, $17 would be what they would need to pay for a drug test. The Florida bill, I think, showed about $30 to $40, that you would like for a person who would only be getting $280 to clothe their family, to have a roof over their head, to put gas in their car that they may need to try to find a job to get out of this situation, that you'd like for them to spend $17 to be drug tested.
Senator, as long as they pass the drug test, they get their $17 back.
Will the senator further yield?
Yes, Senator.
However, you are taking all of these things away from a person and a family that needs it to get an erroneous drug test. Is that not true?
Senator, that's certainly not true. Erroneous would not be the proper terminology to use. Again, if you have to do this in the private marketplace where you are paid for a service and then you pay taxes to fund state programs, and in civil service jobs, to do it the same to get a free government benefit is simply equaling the playing field.
Will the senator further yield?
Yes, Senator.
Is it not true that in Florida, when they put this into place, that many people did not end up taking the drug test?
That is correct. Many people decided not to take the drug test, which I think is a classic example of those who filled out some paperwork and decided they would fail it and did not go forward.
Will the senator further yield?
Yes, Senator.
Could it not simply be that they did not have the money to be able to pay for the drug test? So we are denying them the ability to take care of their family by requiring that they pay for something that they were trying to get help for their family from in the first place.
Senator, we have fundamental disagreements on this issue.
Thank you, Senator.
Chair recognizes Senator from 35th for question.
Yield?
Yes, Senator.
Senator, is this bill, Senate Bill 292, suggesting that everyone, that poor people who have to apply for TANF are on drugs?
Senator, that is certainly not true.
Will the senator further yield?
Yes, Senator.
Do you not think that this is a discriminatory bill against people in poverty, that they would have to take a drug test and pay for a drug test when they are asking for help in these terrible economic times that we're living in right now?
Senator, I'm so glad you asked that question because I absolutely do not. If anything, I think it's discriminatory today that they don't get asked for a drug test when the private marketplace does and civil service jobs do. Why do they get special treatment? Nobody should. We should all have the same equal playing field.
Will the senator further yield?
Yes,
Are
Senator.
you suggesting that this is a job, that they are getting $200 a month, a little more than $200 a month, and you're comparing them with people who are civil servants who will get a salary and other people?
Senator, I did not compare them to having a job, but I did compare them that we are getting a free benefit from the government, or we are working for the government, or working for civil service or private marketplace. And I'm sure, while you are passionate about what you speak, we will have different ideology in this case.
Will you further yield, please?
Yes, Senator.
Did you know that this bill is totally and completely and beyond all questions unconstitutional?
Well, Senator, I believe you probably voted for President Bill Clinton in 1996, and he is the one who, in fact, signed into law the Welfare Reform Act that specifically authorized the states to drug test TANF recipients.
And this is of course, it was introduced by Newt Gingrich, though, right?
But signed by President Bill Clinton.
And so what does that mean? I don't agree with him either. But will you further yield, sir?
Yes, for a couple more questions in lieu
Thank
of
you.
time.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you, Senator. I would like to ask you, do you not think that this is search and seizure of bodily fluids in order to ask them to take this test when the court struck down legislators having to take a test in order to run for office?
I absolutely do not believe that is the case.
And one more question, sir.
Yes, Senator.
Will you yield once more?
For you, my dear.
Thank you. Are you aware that the federal courts in Florida ruled in favor of those who have had to take the test for the drug test for TANF, and that the Florida taxpayers have had a very costly amount taken from their taxes, and that the state would wind up having to reimburse 95.5% of TANF applicants who paid for and passed these drug tests up front, and that only 2.5% of the applicants tested positive for drug use, and only 2% declined to be tested. And did you also know that Florida saved money with only 4% of those who are on TANF and who applied?
Senator, I appreciate that question. I am very familiar with Florida. In fact, we had some of the legislators and folks involved in that here in the Capitol just a couple weeks ago. And the actual numbers were 3% of the people failed the test in Florida, and 9.8% of the people who had filled out the application when they found that there were drug tests decided not to move forward. And the total savings in the first quarter was $1.8 million. I'm quite familiar with Florida. I think they are a good success story. And again, using them in an area we tweaked our law to fix the HIPAA regulations to move forward. And again, I think we'll have a fundamental ideology on this one that we'll not be able to come together on.
Thank you, Senator, but I have different figures, so I don't know whose figures are right. I did some thorough research. I didn't take somebody else's word for it, but thank you very much for answering my question.
Chair recognizes Senator from the second.
Yield, sir.
Yes, Senator.
Explain to me how are our tax dollars being used to fund illegal drugs?
If you are giving, the state is providing TANF dollars to someone who is using that as a source of income to purchase illegal drugs, then that is a direct transfer.
Okay, so do you yield, sir?
Yes, Senator.
So you're saying that the state are giving individuals TANF dollars, and they're taking those TANF dollars to drug dealers?
I believe some of the people who are on TANF are using those to purchase illegal drugs and using them.
So they're giving, do you yield, sir?
Yes, Senator.
So they're receiving state TANF dollars, and they're taking those state TANF dollars to drug dealers, and they're purchasing illegal drugs.
There is a portion of the TANF population that is doing that.
What does a TANF dollar look like, sir, if you may yield?
Well, TANF typically gets an EBT card, which we have seen many times on the TV that have been used and sold for a variety of purposes, unfortunately through that and the SNAP and other programs.
So you're saying that, do you yield, sir?
Yes, Senator.
Senator, are you saying that they're taking the TANF drug card and taking that to a drug dealer and getting drugs?
People are using EBT cards from social services and are selling them, unfortunately, in many different ways today. In fact, many of you have seen on the TV in the last 6 months people doing that who are exchanging it for cash.
And they're taking the TANF dollars to the supermarket and other places?
A variety of things, Senator.
Wouldn't it be a good idea that if we take those TANF dollars and attach them to make sure everyone who receives a TANF dollar have a government issue ID to make sure that their card is assigned to them so that they can buy groceries and other needed things for their families?
Senator, first, I gladly would yield, but I think we're getting off base here.
Do the Senator yield?
Yes, Senator.
Senator, isn't it true that this measure will put an unnecessary burden on the poor and the underserved, especially the parents of children in this great state?
No, that is not the case at all. In fact, again, we went out of our way to make sure we protected children, and enabling somebody's dependency is the worst thing you could do. True compassion is doing what's best for people, not easiest.
Do the Senator further yield?
Yes, for a couple more questions, and then in deference to time of other senators who want to get their bills done, I will be yielding the well.
Will the state provide transportation for the people that receive TANF dollars to go to another site to get the drugs test?
No, they will not. The TANF recipient's going to have to go to a location to apply for their benefits and assume they will go from that location to wherever they need to get their drug test done.
Senator, would that be an extra tax or burden on the TANF recipients of this great state?
I don't believe you can tax a TANF recipient, Senator.
Well, if you tell them they have to find the transportation to go to another site, wouldn't that, sir? Isn't that true, sir, that that is a burden or a tax?
No, Senator, I would not see it that way.
All right.
Senator, and the Wells time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from the 41st, do you wish to be recognized? Recognized, speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I am glad the senator from the 56th did talk about President Clinton. It was a Democrat that came up with some major welfare reform legislation and really made major changes in moving people from welfare to work. We look at this bill and we don't see the elements that are needed to create a truly positive impact on Georgia's families and children. In this case in Georgia, we have low TANF benefits. A single parent of 2 small children must make less than $784 per month. A single woman, parent, with 2 small children must earn less than $784 a month to qualify. That's a very low amount. Those people are struggling to survive each and every day. If this program was well-meaning, drug tests, and it was intended to really create a situation where we tested people for drugs and tried to help the children, this is what we would do. We would pay for that drug testing. The state would ensure that there was drug testing in a controlled and easy manner to have those people tested. And then, because none of us really want people to be in any way fostered or assisted or enabled by our tax dollars, we would then provide some time, and furthermore, because we know children are involved, young children are involved, then we would provide some help to that individual to try to get them straight, some rehab, and if not, DFACS would come in and possibly remove those children, but an investigation would be done. Counseling would be done, and that would be a constructive way to deal with this. But what we are doing with this bill is saying, here you are in the fits of despair. You possibly have lost your job recently. You possibly are living in a neighbor's house or your mother's house or no house, staying in these 2-week hotels that's trying to survive, and making less than $784 with 2 children, but you have to come up with $40 or $30 to be drug tested. You have to go to the place to be drug tested, and then you have to present or have this information done and approved. There are no programs or limited programs, and none additionally created by this bill, that will provide counseling or drug treatment programs, tools that have shown to really get people back to work and back into the workforce, and have been presented in some of the other states that we talked about earlier. So this bill, really, if it creates any savings, is because for those people desperate that can't find the $40 to get TANF benefits. And who suffers? The children, the young children that this money is there to provide food for. Even if someone is in an addictive situation, even for the 2.5% or more that may have an addiction, without money to provide treatment or counselors or investigative responsibilities to make sure the children are safe, monies are coming out of the mouths of those children. Food is coming out of the mouths of those children. So we are not really helping the situation in a really progressive way. We are not making sure that we're helping the people that need to be helped. Although I know the intent from the Senator from 56, I'm sure, is to do all those things. But this is not the right method. One, we have not seen a high occurrence of drug use between TANF recipients. Secondly, we were not presented, if there has been that, we were certainly not presented with any statistical information or detailed analytical research from a university that said this is something that has to be addressed and is more important to address than other issues. Now, you know, if we were just worried about any state dollar going to ever buy drugs, we would test every state employee and we would test every contractor. We have a contract for $50,000 to do a security system or computers service system. We should drug test those people too. What we're saying is because you're poor and you're in desperate shapes, we feel you're more likely to use drugs. And no way has that been proven or demonstrated. And you should reject this bill because of that. You should also know that the human face of the many of these men and women that are suffering, and many of them are women with children out there, the face of those people are faces of people who have been beat up by society, chewed up by jobs or life or spousal problems. And it may not seem important, but it is somewhat dehumanizing when you're in that situation to heap that burden on them that they have to go take this drug test. They already are certainly suffering, that they have to ask for help. And to do that without any probable cause, I don't care whether it's a Fourth Amendment issue, a constitutional issue or not, it's not right to do it unless they bring to this body the proof that it is necessary, the proof that we are subsidizing large amount of people's buying drugs on this small benefit of a maximum of $280 per month. You know, pretty heavy drug addiction, $280 per month. But without us seeing really proof of that, then what this is something that plays on the emotions of who? The emotions of uninformed people who don't know the complex situations that you know about, that don't know the millions and millions and billions of dollars the state spends on other programs where people are just as likely to use drugs or more likely to use drugs that we're not testing them on. This is also going on some of the people that this, quite frankly, feel if you're poor, there's got to be something wrong with you. And quite frankly, some of these people have mental illnesses, may have things wrong with them, but certainly don't have things that we should dehumanize them and lose respect for them without more information. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an important issue. Now, this is a small program compared to some of the other support programs that we have. But I urge you to defeat this bill today because it has not been demonstrated to you that it is really needed. It certainly hasn't been demonstrated that there aren't many other areas that we could be better served if we were going to look at drug testing. Much larger state contractors and people that have more money to actually get a high-level addiction users' tax dollars. But more importantly, we need to look at how to solve problems, not just how to save a few dollars by kicking somebody off a program. And if we're going to save lives and save dollars, then we need to not have caseworkers and DFACs with 700 cases. You know, we need people who can go out there and really investigate what's wrong, help these children, and try to provide corrective actions in the lives of these people that have challenges. No one wants to be on the streets getting a $200, $80 a month check so they can feed their kids. Nobody wants to make less than $784 with 2 children per month to get TANF. So let's kind of grow up and not play on the few people out there who are uninformed. And if you tell somebody and you're ripping and running saying drug addicts shouldn't get benefits of the state, well, yeah, drug addicts shouldn't get benefits of the state, but their kids, maybe we can talk about their kids. Maybe we should talk about what's really effective in helping people and gaining them out of poverty and getting them jobs. We're not talking about jobs. We're just talking and playing into some raw emotional issue. I urge you to defeat this bill. I yield the well or answer questions.
You do have some questions. Senator from 39th is recognized for a question.
Senator Yield.
I yield.
I'd like to cover an area that I would have covered with the senator from the 56 if he had not retired from the well. Did you hear the senator from the 56 say that he supports drug tests for people in the private sector just as he does for TANF recipients?
I did hear him mention that some private sector drug testing he would support, but I don't know if he tied it in that closely.
I think if the senator were further yield.
But I will trust your recollection.
Okay, I appreciate that. The senator will further yield.
I yield.
I would have asked the senator, in that case, if he supports drug testing for TANF recipients, if he supports drug testing in the private sector for job applicants, would he support drug testing for private sector companies that receive state benefits, receive state contracts, receive tax credits? You know that the state gives out so much money in tax credit, hundreds of millions of dollars, that we really, as we stand here today, don't know how much we give out and to whom. But would you support requiring that those companies, those executives, those CEOs that receive tax credits, not $280 a month to feed babies, but CEOs who receive hundreds of millions of dollars do drug testing as well?
Well, thank you, Senator. I think it would be important that we look at other illegal acts, not only drug testing, whether companies have violated the state law and are still, which we have businesses that are doing business with Georgia that have been convicted of criminal activities but yet do business with Georgia and get grants. We're not worried about them doing legal things. I do agree with you that there are areas where state spends millions and millions of dollars in other areas which are just as likely, if not more likely, to have people who act wrongly and possibly have issues with drugs that would be probably more logical if we wanted to save the state more money to test than these individuals that usually don't have transportation, don't have $40 to do the test, and are challenged in those ways. And certainly your point is well taken that this again looks like something kind of playing on the worst fears out there. Do we have a limited time? Oh God, can I answer the question? I'm not limited. We have a minority before we get 10 minutes.
Chair recognizes Senator from 12th.
Thank you, Senator. Senator, do you yield the well? Do you yield? I'm sorry.
I would yield the well if you want a couple minutes. I know that some people are anxious to limit debate, and I don't want to take too many questions and rob you of the choice.
Okay.
So,
but is it not true that very few welfare recipients or TANF recipients have savings accounts or huge monetary investments?
it is very true that many of the people that I've talked to that have come see me often have to borrow $10 to get back to wherever they came from because sometimes they walk to come to my office.
Do you further yield?
I yield.
Is it also true that welfare payments support economic development, and especially in those little towns that we represent in Southwest Georgia?
It is certainly very, very, very important to have this money for those individuals because it is money that flows in the system. But more importantly,
Exactly.
if they don't have this assistance, they become a much bigger problem
Well, it supports
to the
the
local
grocery
governments.
stores and the other little
Oh,
stores
it certainly
that are
does.
there in
And
those
if they don't
communities.
get that help, then they're picked up by the police, they're taken in, and other
Well,
problems.
that's the economic stimulus in a lot of our little communities.
Yes, I
Thank
understand.
you.
Chair recognizes 733rd for a question.
Senator Yield.
I yield.
Let me ask you, Mr. Leader, I read on page 2 of the substitute that the department shall adopt rules, and one of them is to identify laboratories qualified to conduct established drug tests. You see that? You understand?
I don't have. I believe that's true. Yes.
Let me ask you this. Right now, they have a fee of $17 and no specific laboratories or no specific oversight as to how to conduct these tests. Does it sound workable to you?
Senator, in my business, we have drug tested. Of course, a lot of construction companies drug test. $17 is a very low fee. I am concerned about that amount. You know, everything we looked at was $30 to $40 when you're talking about making sure that it has all the protection and safeguards, duplicate checks, etc. So that does sound problematic. And also, you know, I'm always a little concerned to follow the money trail. You know, that this company, you know, this bill might be pushed by a drug testing company for all I know. And, you know, often you have to look behind what the bill says to what its real intent is and who's pushing it for what purpose.
You further yield. Two quick questions.
I yield.
Is it not true, Senator, that we have pain clinics in this state where MDs, doctors of medicine, are overprescribing pain medication, which is a tremendous problem?
That is a tremendous problem.
Is it true that those folks take an oath and these particular people who are employees of this particular testing company have no real responsibility other than their jobs to carry out these things that in a proper manner?
The Senator knows I agree with that.
And isn't it true that we received state benefits and had a drug testing law at one time, and it was found unconstitutional?
That's correct, Senator from the 14th, 33rd, 15th, Senator from the 4th, and myself and others were drug tested in the early 90s, and it was struck down.
Isn't it true somebody that's on drugs can most probably attain a drug-free drug test? If they've got enough money to buy drugs, they're going to probably circumvent the system. Isn't it true that I have seen that happen?
Senator, there's no doubt for some high-level situations, people might have money to bribe, fake. You know, some drugs get out of the system faster. You know, that's one problem with the drug test. You know, more serious drugs actually may leave the system faster. If you wait a week, cocaine's out of your system, you can go get a drug test and you're fine. But let's say you were in a room with 4 people in a little house that your brother-in-law let you stay at. You had no money to move anywhere else. You're desperate with your 3 children, and somebody was smoking marijuana in the other room. You know, certainly DFAC should go in. That's a problem. I'm not saying that's not a horrible situation. But, you know, for 90 days or something, you might be 30 days at least. So, you know, there's a lot of situations that this bill's not taken for account, and I appreciate the Senator's questions.
No more questions.
I'll yield the will. Look forward to your defeat of this bill. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from 39th speak to his amendment.
One of the things, Mr. President, members of the Senate, that we see today is that we are not adverse to passing flawed pieces of legislation. We passed a bad anti-abortion bill that was flawed, even though we have the chief legal counsel, legislative counsel, telling us that it was flawed, that it may have done exactly the opposite of what the bill was supposed to do. So, you all may, and then we just heard the author of this bill say that he depended on folk in Florida to help make this bill a better bill. These are the same folk that got an injunction, got a court case in Florida saying that the bill has a problem. So he said he had legislators and legal folk from Florida helping us. Heaven forbid. They need to stay in Florida, apparently. But, we have a propensity this hour, this day, of passing bills that are deeply flawed. So I have no problems presenting this amendment. And this amendment is a very simple amendment. And it just says that candidates for public office ought to be drug tested. Now, that's right, I'm going to try it again. And I know y'all going to say, well, and I was drug tested. I think I was the last drug test class in 1996. And the law was found to be unconstitutional and invasive shortly thereafter. But be that as it may, let's run it up the flagpole again, even though the U.S. Supreme Court has said that it's unconstitutional. We've had a few changes on the court, not enough changes for some, but let's run it up the flagpole again. Because what we're doing here today, in this bill, if we were to pass it, in the underlying bill, is let's just be real. Let's just be real. What we are doing, truth be told, is criminalizing poor folk. Criminalizing poor people. We give hundreds of millions of dollars away to corporate executives to handle as they see fit. We don't know what they're doing with the money. But we're not putting them in this bill. They need to be drug tested. I trust them less than I do TANF recipients in some instances. That's right, I do. The 1%. But oh no, don't drug test the 1%. Drug test folk who can't stand up for themselves. I am not a lawyer. I'm just a lowly school teacher. But the lawyers have told me that if you do this kind of drug test, which amounts to a search and seizure of bodily fluid, it must be premised on probable cause to believe the individual to be searched has violated the law. Poverty is no grounds for probable cause. Otherwise, Jesus Christ himself would be vulnerable to warrantless drug testing in the state of Georgia when he returns. Many will argue that drug testing under this legislation will not constitute a search or seizure under the Fourth Amendment because TANF applicants would remain free to forego the test if they were willing to forego eligibility for TANF benefits. If you don't want to take the test, then you don't necessarily need to get the benefits. Unfortunately, for those who would make such an argument, however, it holds no constitutional water. To quote from the language of the recent decision that struck down Florida's version of this bill in LeBron versus Wilkins, and I quote, the court said that the state's exaction of consent to an otherwise unconstitutional search in exchange for TANF benefits would violate the doctrine of unconstitutional conditions. Even though a person has no right to a valuable government benefit, the government may not deny a benefit to a person on any basis that infringes his constitutionally protected interest, end of quote, in going free from unreasonable searches and seizures by the government. That has nothing to do with HIPAA. That has to do with whether or not poor folk have rights, and I believe that they do. To those who justify this bill on grounds that might save Georgia money, I point again to Florida's example. I won't go into detail. The cost savings are minimal for the intrusions that TANF recipients will undergo. So I commend this amendment to you. It would require, and I know it's tough as elected officials to subject ourselves to the same things we want to subject poor folk to. I know that's tough, but grin and bear it and do it. It's the right thing to do. Send a message to the people we serve that we're not afraid to subject ourselves to drug tests. I know I'm not. Do it. But I commend this to you. Let's run it up the flagpole again and see what the court has to say. Mr. President, I will yield to questions or retire from the well if there are no questions.
Which would you prefer doing?
I prefer to take as many. I love questions. I love questions.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
I know you. I will yield for questions, Mr. President.
All right. Where was your prop? You left it at your desk.
No, that's for later.
Oh.
That's for later. Let me tell you this.
Looks like we're going to stay all night and stay a little longer.
We're going to stay. Let me tell you this. I have nothing to do this evening.
All right.
I'm ready.
I'm glad I don't either. Chair recognizes Senator from 34th for a question.
Will the Senator yield?
I will to the lady from the 34th.
Senator, would you agree with me that this is just another attempt to just delve into setting us back over and over again?
In all seriousness, Senator, I really wish we'd be dealing with other things of a more productive nature, trying to find the money to help feed poor children for their school lunches and that kind of thing, as opposed to this kind of legislation which doesn't help anyone.
Senator, will you yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you agree with me that if these families had jobs, which is another topic that we just failed to deal with, we rather legislate about women and their bodies, but if they had jobs, then we would be in a better position to provide for families so that we would not need temporary assistance. Would you agree with me, Senator?
I agree with you 100%.
Senator, would you further yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Senator, what we are attempting to do this evening and what this bill is pointing to, would you agree with me that we need to get our priorities together? We need to make sure we don't continue to make the least of these our target. Would you agree with me, Senator?
I agree with you.
Senator, would you agree with me that if we are doing, as so many of us have claimed to be Christians, taking care of the least of these, then we would not be bringing such egregious bills before the state of Georgia?
I fear that you're correct, madam, from the 34th.
It does include babies. Babies like to eat, Senator. But would you agree to me, Senator, since I got some noise over here on my left, would you agree with me that I'm just going to ignore that? And Senator, he made me lose my train of thought. I'll finish. No further questions.
All right. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from 36th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does Senator yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a copy of the bill with you at the rostrum?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
I wanted to ask you to address page 2, the paragraph 9, subparagraph 9.
Yes, I see it.
That's right. And it's accurate to read this as that there's a drug screening application of $17. Now, that's what the author has suggested that the drug screening would cost. But at any rate, does not this language say that eligible applicants who do not have active and current Medicaid benefits shall be responsible for paying the full cost of administering the drug test upon presentation?
Yes, it does say that.
And additionally, people that are covered by Medicaid benefits that the author wants to test. On line 57, it says that it won't be, that they cannot get the test unless the applicant presents a receipt proving that he or she has paid the required drug screening application fee. Isn't that right?
That's correct. And, you know, there's some, I'm skeptical that the $17 is an accurate fee for this kind of test.
Exactly.
There have been some debate about this. I know our Democratic leader has some concerns about that as well. And he knows this. He's involved in this kind of drug testing, so he would know.
And further, earlier during this session, you brought to the well a bag of groceries. And it's already been stated that a family with 2 or 3 children gets $280 a month. If you divide that by 4, you're down to less than $100 a week.
You're exactly right.
Way less than $100 a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so this bill would purport to take $17 out of the pocket of that family right off the top. Isn't that right?
That's right, or more.
Or
probably more.
Or more. So it wouldn't be limited. That's right. And how many meals, one has to ask, are going to be off the table for that family? Struggling, as you have put it so accurately, might not even have a roof over their heads. Maybe one of these temporary, maybe in a shelter. Isn't that right?
And you don't want to be too melodramatic, but it amounts to food being taken off the table. That's exactly correct. There ought to be a better way to do this, or to get to what folks want than to do it that way.
And Senator, I appreciate the careful outlining that you provided us of how suspicionless drug testing is a violation of the Constitution.
That's right.
As a terms of getting a public benefit. And you and I both have been drug tested to run for office, and the courts threw that out. Isn't that true?
That is very true.
So would you agree with me, and I'm sure you would, that this bill just accomplishes creating a cloud of suspicion around people at the lowest rungs of our socioeconomic ladder, with the least income, least options available?
You're exactly right. It criminalizes poor folk. It criminalizes a group of people that it, unfortunately, too often, so many of us are just one paycheck away from being in.
And if the senator will further yield, you've heard the testimony, and in fact the department testified to the committee that their caseloads for their caseworkers are over 700 cases per caseworker.
It's an enormous caseload. Caseworkers and on TANF caseworkers are overburdened. We won't even talk about defects caseworkers, but that number does not surprise me, however much it disappoints me.
And when we confront all these facts about the unconstitutionality on its face of this type of measure, the fact that only one other state has passed it as law, the fact that that law is under injunction from a federal court, and that we are asked to move forward with a state budget that is completely strained. We're closing teen centers, we're taking money out of the school lunch program, but somehow we have time and resources to allocate more red tape and bureaucracy and hoops to jump through over at the department for those 4,000 plus adult recipients of TANF dollars. Is that on its face?
Well, I will say this. It doesn't make sense to me. I think it's a better way to do it.
But if we're going to do it, I think we ought to drug test another class of adults, which are legislators and other elected officials.
And that would be the impact of the amendment that is before us.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for yielding.
All right.
Chair recognizes Senator from 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will Senator yield?
I do.
Senator, I heard you mention earlier that there's 2 court cases. One that has to deal with Georgia and the Supreme Court ruling really that it was unconstitutional for legislators to take a drug test, and also a federal court in Georgia, in Florida as well.
Yes.
Wouldn't it appear that if we're going to introduce this kind of a bill, 292, that it should have been introduced as a constitutional amendment?
It seems to me if we're going to introduce it, I'm not advocating that, it ought to be introduced as a constitutional amendment. But and it's my understanding from talking to lawyers, the case out of Georgia on elected officials went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. That's my understanding. I may be wrong.
So we have problems with this particular legislation as it pertains to the federal Supreme Court. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, sir. U.S. Supreme Court. Mm-hmm.
Would that be because these benefits are partially funded by the feds?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that if you're going to do this kind of invasive test, my understanding is, from what the lawyers tell me, you ought to have probable cause that somebody has committed an illegal act. Applying for TANF benefits does not amount to an illegal act. Wanting TANF benefits is not illegal. So it seems to me that it would be patently unconstitutional from what the lawyers tell me. And I'm depending on them in this case.
Senator Yale?
Yes, ma'am.
Senator,
yes, sir.
I also heard you talk about, and the author of this legislation talk about, under some direct questions from some of the other legislators, about this process and how flawed it is.
Yes, sir.
Now, we have a situation where recipients of these benefits, certainly on the lower rung of the socioeconomic ladder, has to go and pay for a drug test up front. What about in those rural areas of the state? Are there really drug testing facilities?
There may be other senators who can better explain that to us, but it's my understanding in many instances these kind of services are found few and far in between in many rural areas, in many of our rural counties, and I fear that many of the constituents of the legislators in this body will not be able to find services or find them in a timely manner, but that is a burden that I think is real and ought to be taken into consideration.
Senator Yale?
Yes, sir.
Senator, is it not true that I offered an amendment to a previous bill that would have allowed people convicted, ex-offenders convicted of drug offenses, who had gone through drug treatment, completed all of their time, even on probation, to restore their TANF benefits? Is that not true, Senator?
Yes, sir. I remember that amendment.
Is it also not true that this body voted down that amendment?
Yes, sir. That is true.
Senator, do you find it kind of hypocritical that when a good piece of legislation was introduced that would allow those who committed offenses clean themselves up? I think the term I used was those who was on some kind of meth, the meth moms that's been exploding in the state, and still deny and still introduce this legislation that would require testing up front, yet those are clean to reject that legislation and then to turn around and introduce this. Don't you find that kind of hypocritical, Senator?
I won't use the word hypocritical. I'll just say it's ironic. It's ironic that we would do that.
Senator Further.
Yes, sir.
Senator, I live in a county where we had 5 banks. Today we have 0. All have been taken over by the federal government. All have been closed. Seized, some of the assets sold. A few of them were acquired by other institutions. My county, Henry County, is suffering. Where are we in economic development, providing opportunities for our counties, providing some assistance out there to stimulate this economy in Georgia for jobs?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think we're more concerned with this kind of legislation than we ought to be in terms of not only creating jobs, but stopping foreclosures, stopping evictions, doing all the things, protecting children. We've had about 36 children that are in de facto custody of some sort or the other who have died in the last 3 months. We ought to be focusing on those kinds of things as opposed to penalizing and criminalizing poor folk.
Senator Yale?
Yes, sir.
Senator, when you describe this state as being in a banking crisis, a foreclosure crisis, a personal bankruptcy crisis, considering we're at the top of the list across the nation?
I would say it's not only a crisis, I would say it's a meltdown, a foreclosure, banking meltdown, and not very much is being done here at the state capitol since that crisis or that meltdown began about 3 or 4 years ago. You're exactly right.
Senator Yale?
Yes, sir.
Senator, I hope you feel as I do that I came here to work on legislation that's going to boost our economy, create jobs, provide opportunities. I didn't come here to work on these social injustice agenda items. I hope you feel as I do, Senator.
Well, I agree with you. We're focused, we're almost obsessed with social issues as opposed to the bread and butter table issues, kitchen table issues that Georgians are concerned with. I agree with you 100% on that.
Senator Year, one final question.
Yes, sir.
Where's the beef in all of this, Senator? Where's the beef?
Senator, ain't no beef.
Chair recognizes from 33rd.
Senator, I believe we've got a quorum over there and back here. I'm not sure. Isn't it true, Senator, that, bear with me now, I've been trying to figure out how to ask this. Is it not true that so far today we've taken care of the archdiocese, we've allowed 18-year-olds to carry concealed weapons, we've told the public what kind of knives they can carry, we spent possible $750 million but saved $100,000 later in the day, took health procedures away from women, consulted a state that's already in court, and now we're punishing children for the sins of their fathers. Would you agree with me?
Senator.
And in just a few minutes, we might just repeal the First Amendment of the United States. Would you agree with me it's a great day in Georgia?
I would agree with your listing of our transgressions, but I would not agree with the fact that it's a great day in Georgia. Thank you, sir.
Senator from the 38th, you wishing to ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it not true, Senator, that in the state of Florida, they did a pilot test that is required by law to show a reason to have drug testing, and in Georgia, if we're following the law, we needed to do some sort of test to prove the reason for us doing and requiring some type of drug testing in Georgia.
I know the lady knows of what she speaks.
Is it not true then that we are, as we've already said, passing a law that will be certainly struck down? In Florida, at least went the extra step to follow the law, even though their law is now is in court.
If you are suggesting that we should have maybe put in place a pilot program of some sort, I agree with you that it would have been better than going full hog in this piece of legislation. I agree with you if that's your suggestion.
Thank you, Senator.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, this is the posture that we're in. We've allowed the debate to go on for an hour and a half, and a lot of folks have obviously spoken on this issue. What I would like to do is I'd like to recognize the senator from the 22nd to briefly speak to his amendment. No questions, and let's call the question. Chair is recognized. Senator from the second.
We have a minority report, Mr. President.
You want to do that? Chair recognizes Senator from 21st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the previous question.
Is there objection? All those in favor of the previous question, rise, stand, and be counted. Chair recognizes Senator from 22nd. Inquiry. Oh,
roll call vote, Mr. President.
All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, lock the machine. Senator from 36, what purpose you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that the rules call for when a minority report is filed that the filers of the minority report get 10 minutes as the debate is concluded?
After this vote, you're going to have 10 minutes. That's exactly right.
Thank you.
You've stated your question right.
Thank you.
I'd ask that we were able to move forward because we've debated this for an hour and a half, but obviously there's more debate that needs to ensue.